We are ready to begin our program. I want to welcome all of you here today. Thanks for coming out. We are here to celebrate the 100th anniversary of the Hotel Jamestown. It was 100 years ago, this New Year's Eve, that the Hotel Jamestown opened for business. And it was right here in this room, in the Crystal Ballroom, that so many events worth remembering and celebrating happened. Some of them you can see pictured in the photos that have been reproduced here. I'm Rick Miller, and I serve on the board of the Jamestown Housing Authority. I want to thank my fellow board members who helped to plan this event. The pictures that you see displayed up here are a small sampling of the history of this place, from a vintage postcard, this one here, to the sports banquets, to Desi and Lucy's visit, as well as WJTN, which shares the anniversary of the hotel. In a few moments, Greg Peterson will be up here. He's a familiar friend to many of us, his connection to the Jackson Center, and his passion for documenting history and people's stories. He will lead a panel discussion.
The guy who's filming this is Ed Tomasini. Ed Tomasini was honored yesterday at the Robert H. Jackson Center for his unstinting and totally under the radar volunteerism by the Chautauqua Region Community Foundation. So let me pause to honor Ed, who's doing the same here. Capturing history, and boy, Dennis, you're an impossible act to follow. So articulate, so your visualization is incredible. But let me take you down a journey which is very personal to me. Visualize, if you will. Visualize, if you will. January 24th, 1961, a 10-year-old. Me. I had just turned 10 years old, and as my birthday gift from my father, he said, "Greg, how would you like to join me to be in a special dinner that's going to be hosted at the Hotel Jamestown?" I don't know if he said all that, but he said, "Let's go to this dinner." And I came here, a 10-year-old, and stood right there in awe, shock and awe, because in front of me, sitting at this table and this table and this table, were some of the biggest named celebrities in the history of sports. I, a typical 10-year-old, read the news and read the sports specifically. And I got to meet and get autographs from Howard Cosell, Elroy Face, Jim Bunning, Sam Huff, Andy Robustelli, Paul Pender, who's the middleweight champion of the world. And it goes on, and I can prove it, because here it is. And this started one personal journey down a road of interest with sports personalities, autograph collecting, networking, subsequently learning how all of the people, many of them you'll meet here who are on the panel, were part of the most incredible 25 years that any community could possibly talk about. The biggest names in the history of sports were in this room. 800 people, I don't know, maybe 600, 800. All I can really remember is at the end of the day, I ended up with a lot of autographs, a lot of stories, a few pictures, and my eyes that could not open because they were so swelled by the smoke of that in case you remember those days when they were smoking and you couldn't see when the day was done and your clothes had to be discarded when you walked in the door. That was my experience for the many years that I came to sports dinners. I lost a lot of jackets and sweaters. So I'll get into some of my own personal stories, but I thought to set the stage, it's important, as Dennis said, you got to know where you came from to know where you're going to. And this all had a beginning. It all had a beginning, and the man, nobody more has the more gravitas to provide the history of these 25 years of the Temple Hessed sports dinners than the head of the Chautauqua Sports Hall of Fame, Randy Anderson. Randy?
From 1952 to 1976. The Men's Club of the Temple Hessed Abraham organized all-star sports nights, as they were officially called. The dinners were held right here in the Crystal Ballroom of the Hotel Jamestown. And many of the greatest names in American sports attended. Many came from Buffalo, Cleveland, Pittsburgh, or New York, the closest cities with professional teams that most sports fans in this community identified with. But other sports celebrities came here directly from Rochester. Why Rochester? The Men's Club of the Temple Hessed Abraham wisely scheduled their all-star sports nights for the evening after the Hickok Award dinner in Rochester. The Hickok Award was a gem-studded belt worth about $10,000, even back then. It was a national award presented annually in late January or early February to the American Athlete of the Year. So even though it was the middle of winter in snowy Jamestown, it was best for the Temple Men's Club to schedule their event to coincide with a date when many of our country's greatest athletes were just a few hours away in Rochester. Many sports stars drove to Jamestown. Some arrived at the Jamestown Municipal Airport on flights from Allegheny Airlines, or as it was affectionately known at the time, Agony Airlines. As the All-Star Sports Nights were organized by a men's club, it was generally understood that this was an event for men and their sons. There was never a formal rule that barred women, but women simply understood that they were not to attend. And none of the celebrity sports stars who showed up were women. For the men of the Jamestown area, all-star sports nights were a chance of a lifetime to meet some of the greatest names in American sports, face to face. For an extra cost, men could attend a pre-dinner cocktail hour, shake a hand, share a drink, and ask a question. Their sons moved about with a program and notepads collecting autographs. Everyone, including the boys, wore a jacket and a tie. The All-Stars wore name tags pinned to their lapels so that the guests could lean forward and see who they were talking to, because many of those sports stars were not recognizable out of uniform. The cocktail hour featured an open bar with stacks of free cigarettes available. Many men smoked cigars or pipes, and when the social hour ended, the room was thick with blue smoke. This ballroom held from anywhere from 700 to 800 people. But it always seemed like there were more than that in attendance. Allegedly, the Jamestown fire chief was given free tickets to the event to ignore any fire capacity regulations that may have existed. So, why and how did the sports nights get started? Here's the history. In 1950, the Temple Hessed Abraham was growing with about 80 Jewish families living in the community. It fell upon the men's club to raise money for a needed expansion of the synagogue. Sam Siegel, a car dealer in Jamestown and a rabid boxing fan, suggested the idea of a sports dinner, and the men of the club quickly agreed. Cy Goldman, the owner of WJTN Radio, had a lot of connections in New York City and beyond. John Yackham, the former owner of the Jamestown Falcons baseball team and a successful businessman, although not Jewish, also seemed to know everybody, from the President of the United States down to the bat boys of the Washington Senators. Hillman Lyons, the general manager of the Hotel Jamestown, was also a huge sports fan with lots of connections. The Hotel Jamestown was a logical place to hold such an event because of its large ballroom and excellent rooms in which guests could stay. After deciding that they would stage a sports dinner and agreeing on the location, the next question was, when? When would we do this? Winter would have to be out of the question, right? Who would be crazy enough to come to Jamestown in the middle of winter? Well, summer was not ideal either. People were on vacations. The ball players were in season. When to have it? But then a club member from the Temple brought up the Hickok Award dinner in Rochester. The S. Ray Hickok Award was named after the founder of Hickok Manufacturing Company, an outfit that specialized in leather goods for men. What if we did it the very next night, right after the Hickok dinner, and scoop up some of those athletes from nearby Rochester? That's a good idea. Let's try it. The very first Temple dinner was in 1952. And as Greg mentioned, it lasted about 25 years, ending in 1976. All-Star Sports Nights began at a time when most people in Jamestown listened to sports on the radio. And it continued to thrive for a while after television came to most households in town. But eventually, the All-Star Sports Nights could not survive the explosion of money that came to sports. In the 1950s, athletes' salaries were relatively meager, and the athletes had to work in the off-season or go on the fried chicken circuit of sports dinners to make money to feed their families. As athletes began earning thousands of dollars and then millions of dollars, as player unions and sports agents gained a stranglehold, the athletes no longer needed to do appearances in the winter to make a living. And those that did charged exorbitant fees when they did agree to do events. But back in the day, the athletes who showed up in Jamestown at the Temple Hessed Abraham sports dinners were superstars. They were heroes. They were respected and admired. But for all of that, they seemed like the rest of us because they were accessible. We could reach out and touch them. We could get their autograph, at least for one day. The Temple Hessed Abraham Synagogue building, which was located at 215 Hall Avenue, over by the Lynn Funeral Home, was sold in 2017, when the ever-dwindling congregation was down to just 12 families. Thank you very much.
How do we know this history? How do we really know this history? And there are really just a couple of sources. And one, the obviously 700 or so people are actually there, but the people and most importantly the person who wrote it down and preserved it in photographs and in print was Frank Hyde. There was really one person, Frank Hyde. And he presented it, and then in addition and subsequently, it was captured on radio by Jim Roselli. Jim would be downstairs at the cocktail hour, because that's where my dad would take me to get the autographs, was the cocktail hour, and there would be Jim interviewing celebrities on the radio. And I believe it was Sarah Paterniti, Dennis, who would be there kind of grabbing the people so they could sit down with Jim and taking some pictures. Oh, to have Sarah's pictures. Oh, to have Jim's interviews. So Dennis, keep looking. But today, we're blessed to have Scott Kindberg, the successor to Frank Hyde, Jim Riggs, and now we're blessed to have Scott Kindberg carry on a long tradition and to give sort of a person's perspective from the Post-Journal, which was the source of it all. I might also add an unfinished draft of the history of this organization and dinners is being written by Tom Hyde, son of Frank Hyde, so at some point we may see that. So without any further ado, to give us sort of a vignette, bird's eye view is Scott Kindberg. Scott?
It was 2013 that I got to work, and on my desk was an envelope, a large envelope, from Greg, and it included the manuscript that he was just talking about from Tom Hyde. It measured about 1 inch thick. It's a great read, and hopefully it gets completed at some point. It's wonderfully written by Tom, and like Greg said, he's the son of my hero, Frank Hyde, who was the sports editor of the Post-Journal from 1945 to 1979. But the sports night was like Christmas, New Year's, 4th of July, birthday for me. I attended 6 sports dinners over the years, and among the stars that have been in this, I'm standing where the dais was, people like Joe Louis, Jim Brown, Mickey Mantle, Pete Rose, Jesse Owens, Terry Bradshaw, Bob Gibson, and Roberto Clemente. Ernie Banks, Johnny Unitas, Bill Beck. As Greg mentioned, Howard Cosell also appeared at various times during the 24-year history of the event. Those names weren't a surprise to me, really, as I read Tom Hyde's fascinating account, which is still a work in progress. Fact is, I'd attended, like I said, 6 of the dinners when I was growing up. And years later, I'd written columns for the Post-Journal about those special winter evenings. I must admit, however, that I was floored also in 2013 when I was reminded by Randy that among the featured guests from the 1956 banquet was Jackie Robinson, the Brooklyn Dodger great, along with comedian and Jamestown native Lucille Ball and her husband Desi Arnaz. Ball and Arnaz were in town for the world premiere of their new film, Forever Darling. Armed with that information, I retreated to the Post-Journal's library, found the microfilm labeled February 1956, feathered it into the projector, and searched for the date, February 6th. I wasn't disappointed. The coverage provided by Frank and his staff was complete and entertaining. The photos supplemented Hyde's work tremendously and included a panoramic shot of the dais spread out over 2 pages. 2 people sitting side by side drew my immediate attention. And you can see it down here to my left. On the left was Jackie Robinson. On the right was Jamestown native Jim McCusker, who was then in the middle of an All-American football career at the University of Pittsburgh. And you all might know him as the owner of the pub just around the corner on Main Street. Man, talk about a find. Because of the renewed interest in all things Robinson, I loved the release of the movie 42 on the big screen in 2013. I enthusiastically read Frank Hyde's account of Jackie's speech. Below the headline, quote, 800 hear Robinson pleas for racial tolerance, following is Hyde's reporting of the Hall of Famer's speech, along with further reporting by Post-Journal staffers Jerry Scorsese and Vern Larson. Wrote Frank, quote, Jackie Robinson, Brooklyn infielder and the first Negro to break organized baseball's color barrier, talked baseball, but he also dwelt to some lengths on the problems of his race and its progress toward recognition. We have made wonderful advances and have pushed aside many obstacles, Jackie said. We never ease the fight until we have eliminated the obstacles that now face us and continue to put America in a bad light with the rest of the world. Frank continues, Jackie emphasized the importance of the present moves toward non-segregation on the sports diplomatic stage. Said Jackie, the entire world is wondering. We can preach democracy as much as we wish, but the world will never truly and fully accept our democracy as long as racial discrimination exists, for no nation is stronger than its weakest link. Now keep in mind, these dinners were usually joke-filled, and this is what fascinated me about Frank's reporting, is that he wasn't reporting on the jokes or the humor that was usually filled the evening. And especially in our times, I thought it was really amazing that he would spend his entire article talking about Jackie Robinson and the struggles that he had in seeking equality. Frank also wrote, Robinson traced his baseball career briefly and his trials as a professional player. He lauded Branch Rickey, now retired president of the Pittsburgh Pirates, who as general manager of the Brooklyn Dodgers, brought Robinson into the major leagues. Mr. Rickey's guidance and assurance, Jackie said, many times volunteered by long-distance telephone, helped me over the bad spots. Under the headline, quote, fanfare from the banquet front, Scorsese and Larson, Frank's colleagues, provided more news and notes about Robinson's visit to Jamestown. Jackie strongly implied that unless he has an exceptional season in 1956, that will be his final year of professional baseball. I don't want to be one of those guys who hangs around just to get money out of the ball club, Robinson said. But he reiterated his intention to win the Dodger third base job and vowed, quote, if anyone goes down there to spring training with the idea of sitting on the bench, he shouldn't be in baseball. Snappily dressed in a black wool suit, Jackie, who turned 36 in just a week before his appearance here, indicated he would neither anticipate or relish a managerial post upon his retirement. And Jackie believed that it would be the Dodgers, Giants, and Cincinnati battling for the National League pennant in the summer of '56. And by the way, Jackie was correct. The Dodgers won the National League pennant in 1956, but they lost to my beloved Yankees in the World Series. In his final season, Robinson batted .275 with 12 home runs, 43 RBIs, and 12 stolen bases. Quite possibly the most influential athlete in history, was inducted into the Baseball Hall of Fame in 1962, and Jackie was right here in this very room 68 years ago.
Also, you see the picture, there's Lucille Ball. That was the evening where Lucille Ball showed up at this event. Jackie Robinson, Jim McCusker, Desi Arnaz, And I'm sure by raise of hand, does anybody remember when they came here, was physically here? There we go, the rat balls, thank you. Hi, Sharon. I was also one of those little squirts out there in 1956 in the pouring rain, watching Desi Arnaz on a fire truck, thinking that was fun. My mother thought I should think it was fun. I was what? There's no two ways about it. So Anne Lucille Ball was the first female to show up at the Sports Hall of Fame dinner. How do I know anything behind the scene of the Chautauqua, of the Temple Hessed Abraham Sports Dinner? Because Mike Goldman, son of Cy Goldman, owner of WJTN, the mastermind, the Oz behind the curtain, the person who organized all that stuff. And when Cy passed away, Mike was gracious enough to say, Greg, come and take all these files. And I did. Shy as I am, I did. And some of them I still have, some of them the Chautauqua Sports Hall of Fame has. But in reading them, you get to see how a person makes a dream a reality. Cy Goldman. It's Cy Goldman. And he made it a reality at a place that was owned by, and that's Mike Goldman, by the way, the son of Cy. And then right to his right, I didn't introduce him yet, Bruce Badler, who was earlier introduced by Dennis, son of Luke Badler. And you'll see pictures periodically in the Post-Journal of those folks who were at the cocktail party, pictures taken by Frank Hyde and whoever was taking, probably Vern Larson or somebody taking pictures. And there'd be Bruce Badler, always got a little play because Dad owned the building. And then there was Mike because Dad ran the show. You know, and then Scott Kindberg because his dad, Kinky Kindberg, always dressed to the nines in the police outfit, and those who remember the knickers. You know, Scott always got played. Randy, you and I were left out. I just want you to know we didn't make the cut. So I thought I'd pause
So
now.
are you saying that even though we've been friends for 61 years, it really started because you took advantage of me?
Well, let me go further. The answer is yes. This is the beginning of the conversation. Because Mike, I didn't know, but I knew he would swim Saturdays at the YMCA. I knew he was the son of Cy Goldman. I would read in the Post-Journal, because they would bring these out one Post-Journal article at a time. It was the teaser announcing Roger Maris, MVP of the 1960 American League, was coming. And then somebody else would come. I was very anxious because I would cut the articles out of the Post-Journal, put them in a scrapbook, which I still have. And I wanted to know more. And I know the only reason I might know more if I went to the YMCA on Saturdays when he had the swim, because there Mike Goldman would be. And poor Mike, who didn't know me, I was just a toe-headed kid from Southside, trying to work names from him. Does your dad mention anybody who's coming? And occasionally, he's much older than me. He would just say, Greg, walk away. But he would give me some. But Mike, well, I'm going to stand up, grab the mic and talk to me a little bit about what you recall about your dad. Because your dad, when I looked at the files, how he worked getting the talent here is a marvel. A marvel which some of us who've read them have learned to employ, at other aspects, my own, of the Robert Jackson Center, how to get people.
In 1939, when a group from Syracuse, known as Newhouse Broadcasting, bought the radio station. At that time, there was a 21-year-old kid from Carthage, New York, who had gone to Syracuse University and had also graduated from what would become Newhouse School of Communications. He then went to work for a radio station up there, WSYR, owned by, guess who? The same company, Newhouse Communications. And since he was a young kid and he was single, they sent him to Jamestown, New York. And of course, he was a resident of Jamestown, New York, until he passed. So, but after that, about 9 years later, in 1948, some of his relatives got him together with a woman who was my mother. And her last name was Finer, but that's not the important thing. My maternal grandmother's maiden name was Sherman. Now it turns out, speaking of boxing, that there was a magazine out of New York City called Ring Magazine. And the editor was a guy by the name of, I believe it's Ned Sherman. Could have been Nat Sherman, but I don't mind me. As I said, I'm 74 years old. I have Alzheimer's. So I don't remember everything well. So my father met all of these people. So that's where this New York City connection came from. And the only other thing I'm going to add to what's been said before, because Dad not only owned a radio station in Jamestown, New York, he owned one in Erie, Pennsylvania. And not that the name Art Kellyan would have it mean anything to anybody, but Art thought this idea of a sports dinner was great. So he set up a sports dinner in Erie, Pennsylvania. So for a period of time, an athlete could go to the Hickok dinner on, let's see, was that on Sunday? Monday was here? Is that, am I right on that?
Tuesday,
Huh?
I think it was Tuesday was here.
Tuesday was here. Monday in Rochester. Thank you. I thought we weren't gonna. Oh, never mind. So it was Monday in Rochester, Tuesday here, and Wednesday in Erie. So it actually became a three time. They got three shots at the dart. Hey Dennis, when did your father start at WJTN? Was it anywhere near 39?
1951.
Oh, a little later. Okay, sorry about that. So I have, Dennis and I were talking because I have some really great memories. Of my father and his father.
As do all of us, and there's a long legacy and legend of the WJTN. And of course, Cy Goldman being the program chair. He's never the chair of the dinner. There was other people he led to that, but he was sort of in charge of the talent. And as Mike indicated, how they would manage to finesse the Hickok Award as the premier one, get them to Rochester, and then get that on Monday, get them here. He would pay them, of course, a little bit less, but give them a little bit more. So it was a way to get the talent all the way through the talent itself, saying, all right, I'm making a few more bucks by happening to get a few more days of just floating around in western New York and northwestern Pennsylvania. One of the things that the place, obviously, it had to have a venue, and the venue, it was here. And as Dennis so wonderfully set forth the history, one guy named Dr. Milton Badler took a roll of the dice. Bruce, did he ever explain to you why he decided to leave his medical profession to do this?
He always dabbled in real estate. He had some partners in different activities that were going on, some in Canada, a couple in Jamestown. He talked with people at HUD in Buffalo, and the conversion of the hotel became the first in the nation, and it was called Operation Turnkey, where they took hotel rooms, 2 hotel rooms, and converted it into a 1-bedroom apartment, sometimes 3 rooms, made a 2-bedroom apartment out of that, converted a bathroom to a kitchen. And that was basically it. He kind of had a deal with HUD in Buffalo that if he went ahead and did this, that they in turn would also make the purchase after all the renovations were done. So he got his loans, mortgages, and things like that, and it finally came to fruition. Now, what a lot of people don't know is myself and 2 or 3 of my classmates from Southwestern were working during this conversion. My pet peeve was the fact that Bobby Johnson got to run the elevators and I had to work labor. I didn't enjoy that very much, but he controlled the handle a little bit more. Back in those days, the handle, and you had to stop it at a certain point on the floor. But anyway, and eventually, it was a wonderful conversion. We had a waiting list that was pages and pages long. People moved into a place which was secure. All of the maintenance was taken care of. They could live their lives in peace, a lot healthier. And subsequent to that, there were a lot of housing developments that came about through the 70s into the 80s. My dad also started one in Sherman, New York, North Haven Apartments, 1981. We had 24 units out there. The last apartment was 25. Nobody wanted an apartment number 13. But yeah, that's the basic history of it. And over the years, we kept it in the family. 1986, my dad kind of retired and gave me the aggravation. And we continued on for many, many years, had a good working relationship with the Housing Authority, and maintained the building as best we could for the next many, many years. Occasionally I'll get a call from Mr. Rizzardi. Do you know where this is? Do you know where that might be? And we do our best to help them out when needed. But that's about it. Thank you.
Aside from your angst about not getting the elevator job, you did have some perks. Because I have seen your picture in the paper with regards to the sports dinner. So do you have any reflections or recollections of your dad getting into those dinners?
Well, I attended two of the sports dinners, 1964 and 1965. Collected some signatures and introductions to Jimmy Brown, Ernie Green, Lou Saban was one, many, many others. Can't recall at this point. But my biggest joy was the fact that for $25 you could get a special card and you could go up on the mezzanine and just filter through all of these celebrities. And it was, I just couldn't revel what was going on there. It was unbelievable. And you look back in the memories and then you know how important and how meaningful it was to be able to do something like that. And it was all the temple, Cy Goldman, the fact that the Crystal Ballroom was here and the mezzanine was here, that we were able to hold this function. And it was just marvelous.
Talk about memories. I hesitate to tell this one story, but I will, because if I don't, Randy Anderson will tell it about me. First of all, I got to tell the one you talk about Jackie Robinson, the reporting, Frank King, was so wonderfully, almost sober and reflective. But one story I did live through, and it's been repeated several times, is the fact that Sam Huff, 1961, the very first time I was ever at a sports dinner. I'm sitting about where Dennis was, again, I could hardly see, but I could hear, and I was making notes of funny stories so I could tell my mother. And Sam Huff was telling the story about Jimmy Brown. Sam Huff, for those who might remember, was a middle linebacker for the New York Giants. There was a I don't know if it's 60 Minutes at the time, but the violent world of Sam Huff, he was featured. He was a celebrity. And so we could only watch on Sundays one NFL game. Now you get, of course, a million of them. One. It was the Cleveland Browns. Cleveland Browns, Carling Black Label beer sponsored football. And it was the biggest game was always against the Giants. So it was the Giants, the fearsome foursome, Andy Robustelli, Jim Cavanaugh, and all those guys, Sam Huff, middle linebacker, against Jimmy Brown. And he'd always told the story, because Jimmy Brown, about the fact that they handed the ball to Jimmy Brown. Sam Huff was he was monitoring him and just shadowing him. Boom, sticks him for about a yard down the field and says, "Brown, you stink." Second play, hand it to Brown. He goes off left side, off middle linebacker. Boom, sticks him again for a yard. "Brown, you stink." Quarterback once again goes back to Jimmy Brown. Jimmy Brown goes right side, does a little deke, left, right. Huff misses him. Brown goes for 65 yards and a touchdown. Brown's walking back to the huddle, walking back to the sidelines, looks at Huff. "Hey, Huff, how do I smell from here?" So that's the Sam Huff funny story, which has been recited in other kind of articles. But me personally, in this day, you could hesitate and you'd be probably called, my dad would be called and stuff, but it was a dinner and I actually can recall it specifically because I have an autograph here. January 30th, 1968. I have one of those tickets, Bruce Battler. I am at the mezzanine. I am down there getting autographs. There it is. Henny Youngman. Henny Youngman. You know, remember Henny Youngman? Was here as the comedian. Special guest. And for whatever reason, I had a Polaroid camera. I'm taking pictures, and he goes, "How would you like to take some pictures of me?" And I said, "Great, this is the famous comedian who I've seen on Ed Sullivan, Andy Youngman." So he takes me upstairs into a hotel room here at the Hotel Jamestown where he was staying. I go in with my Polaroid, and he manages to take off his jacket, takes the cover of the sheets, wraps it around him like he's an Arab sheik, puts a thing on his head, the pillowcase on his head, puts a mat up, take a picture of me, and I take a picture of him in his hotel room. I'd be 17 at the time. And I'm taking a picture with Henny Youngman. So I got the pictures, he wanted it. So it comes out, I gloss it up, give it to him. I did two of them. I have one signed, which I couldn't find. And Henny Youngman was there and said, "This has been great. Thanks so much. I enjoyed so much, Greg, this opportunity." And so I went there for like a half an hour. And my dad, who was wondering, what happened to my son? He just plain disappeared. I come down off the elevator with Henny Youngman thinking nothing of this whatsoever. But in today's world, if that had all happened, it would have a whole different reaction. But nevertheless, I say that in self-defense because I better tell it because Randy Anderson will otherwise talk about Henny Youngman and me. And embellish it, and it would get... And I also had his violin. If you remember, he did a violin. Anybody remember Henny Youngman at all? I mean, am I talking... Somebody help me out here. Anyways, Scott, why don't you grab the microphone, because you lived a few incidences of yourself with the Sports Hall of Fame, and then we'll wrap up with Randy, and then we'll open it up to anybody who might have a memory.
Well, like I said in my comments earlier, I had been to 6 sports dinners, and I'm so glad that my brother Gary is not here today, because to this day, 50 years later, he still laments that he never got to attend one. What he fails to realize, he would have been about 2 years old. So I'm not sure he would have appreciated it. But coming to this room and then the mezzanine below was like Christmas, New Year's, like I said, one of the biggest day of the year for me. It was just tremendous. And because of my dad's friendship with Frank Hyde, somehow I'd always find my photo in the paper the next day, and so Alan Page, who was the MVP of the NFL in the 1969 season, he was here, and so I had my picture taken with him. And Milt Power, I believe, was the gentleman from the committee who was also in the photo. But what you can't see is the fact that I, as a 9-year-old, was kneeling on a table in order so that, Alan Page is 6'5", and I was about 4 or 5. And so that's what I remember, was kneeling on a table when the picture was taken. And then other opportunities to have photographs with Jim Palmer, who was one of the best pitchers in Major League Baseball in the mid-'70s. Having Mickey Mantle sign a whole bunch of stuff when he was here in 1976, which was the last dinner. And one thing that my cousin Tim Kindberg and I did one year, I think it was in the 1974, it was when Pete Rose was here. We brought our cassette tape recorders and recorded the entire banquet, and the jokes and everything that went on, and I would love to have had those still in my possession, but I have no idea where they are, or if, I'm sure they don't exist anymore. But that's how seriously we took it. It was a special time, and hats off, Mike, to your dad and all those gentlemen who put it together, because it'll never happen anywhere. Doesn't matter. Even New York City couldn't accommodate the fees that the biggest stars in the world would command these days, and we had them right here in this room. It was pretty special.
Randy, you're as the repository at the Chautauqua Sports Hall of Fame of all things sports, and I know you have many of these things. People can talk about it. Do you have a kind of a reflection on where this Temple Hessed Sports Hall of Fame time period, this era, and the era being from 1952 to 76, kind of fits into the scheme of sports here in Chautauqua County?
Well, the mission of the Chautauqua Sports Hall of Fame is to honor and preserve the sports history of Chautauqua County. And there's no doubt in my mind that those 25 years of sports dinners were some of the most magnificent times in the history of sports in our county. And I want to shout out to Mike Goldman for sharing your father's files with Greg, who has in turn shared them with us. And we've just got a great history of that event, thanks to the Goldman family. So thank you so much, Mike.
This is sort of the formal end of the formal presentation. And Amy, for you, the thing that most people wanted when they came here was not to listen to the speeches, was to get the autographs. So I have the autographs of these distinguished gentlemen, plus Dennis Webster, to give to the Jamestown Housing Authority, as this will be one of one. One of one.